Welcome to Cloud Dialogues. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Welcome to Cloud Dialogues, another thrilling episode. I'm Matt Gillard. I think I forget to intro myself sometimes. And we're joined by Georgia Smith, as per usual. They say hi, Georgia.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon.
We are going to talk about how design thinking can be applied to your cloud transformation program. Maybe we can start with what is design thinking?
I feel like everyone knows what design thinking is.
Oh, okay.
You don't reckon?
Just a level set.
I think everybody will come across some level of design thinking in their career, especially if they're at that executive level. But design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation, right? And there's also different ways to do it. And probably in most people's careers, they will come across a suite of different tools that allow them to do that.
Yep.
But what I think in terms of cloud transformation, what I get asked a lot is executives coming to me saying one of two things. Either, firstly, we've gone through a cloud transformation. We've moved a bunch of virtual machines to the cloud. We're mostly on cloud, but we don't feel like we're getting value from it. Like we've gone through this migration process and we don't feel like we're getting a whole lot of value from it. Or on the other hand, we want to start using cloud, or we've just started using cloud. Like we're using cloud kind of like sporadically in our organization, which is usually the case with even like medium-sized organizations. You may not know that there's actually cloud being used in your organization, but we want to move to cloud, in a way that is to drive value in our organization. So what I have done with many executives and their teams and working level experts that are actually doing things on the ground, firstly, let's ask ourselves, what is mission critical to you as an organization? If we start there, if we can understand in a really detailed way what's mission critical to you, and if we look at that currently, what do those processes and interactions and user journeys, whether it's like customer journeys or whether it's also, and I think this can be done in a really dynamic way, the journeys of the people that are actually supporting your customers on the ground every day. If we can understand those in a really detailed way, that will enable us to reimagine all of those interactions and really nail down an architecture that's going to enable us to deliver in the way that we think is the best way that we could do it, right?
And that architecture could be like a technical, a combination of technical and organizational architecture.
100%. And the scope of that will be transformational, right? Generally, the scope of that will be transformational. So that will be like processes, architecture, governance, policies. It will include, once you look at all of those interactions, you'll find that all of those things are part of those journeys that your customers and the people supporting your customers, and you could do this on any kind of function, right? I mean, if we think about this like from a if we think about it from, let's consider healthcare for a second, right?
Okay. So and a vertical, yep.
Yeah, let's think about it from a vertical perspective, right? So if we think about like healthcare, emergency response, how do we rapidly respond to, say, like emergency calls, dispatching of ambulances to a person that is in need right now? So that's an example of our mission critical process, right? So, yeah. And that would be for like the NHS or whatever, right? This is just an example. Mission critical processes. If you're a bank, you're a financial institution, processing of transactions. How do your customers engage with you to process transactions? Who are all the people involved? What does that end-to-end kind of engagement look like? But these are the types of things that I think if you start as an organization, if you're looking at transformation and how you can do things differently and how you can get that most value out of cloud, starting with those mission critical processes, how do we completely rethink those? So what I wanted to do today was to give executives a framework to utilize to actually kickstart that process in their organizations.
Yeah, a lot of executives might have been pressured to start some sort of quick migration program or some other cloud program without full
Like mass
buy-in from everyone.
migration. Yeah,
And
yeah,
so this is a good
100%.
opportunity. This is a good opportunity for people to step back and think about what they're doing and whether it makes sense and whether there's other problems that can be solved by thinking about everything in your organization, getting all the ideas out on the table and working out what actually is meaningful to their organization. So I think,
Yeah, a lot of the time when organizations go do that mass migration kind of process, they think that it's a way of like, it reduces technical debt to some extent, right? You've got a ton of servers sitting in a data center and you just want to get rid of them, and that's understandable. But I think in the long term, it's not going to drive the right outcome. What I would rather do is look at that estate of mission critical applications, go through this process of really deeply understanding what the requirements are. What are actually those non-functional requirements if we look at the users and different personas involved in that process, and how can we deliver them in the most efficient way? Because what you might find is actually you decide to scrap your entire estate. It's not going to work anymore. Get rid of all your technical debt, rewrite all the code. And that might be a better approach, right? I think we often get stuck on things that, and like what Joe was saying about not becoming attached to your applications. I think a lot of organizations are kind of deeply attached to their applications, and being able to kind of let go of that is such a great thing. I love what he said about I think he's saying we have an application that takes notes or something, and it's called Scribe, and it's literally like we're not going to give them cute names because we don't love them. They're just applications. They enable us to do our job. I love that idea. So really today was just about giving executives the framework by which they could go through this process themselves.
Yeah, and that first stage around thinking the ideas, and I guess there's a concept of a value stream which people are probably aware of.
Yes. And I think, there's different ways of doing this, right? And I know people ask me a lot about, given that I spent a few years at Amazon, they ask me about working backwards. Obviously, I'm intimately familiar with that process. And I think it works for product development. I don't think it's a strategy development process. So I think it's great when you're solely thinking about, a singular product for a singular customer, because that process is really focused on just one persona, and I don't think it's a reality in real life, right? I think there will be tensions between the different personas, and that's fine. Obviously, customer obsession is important, but equally, I like to do a value stream mapping approach, but I also like to understand the user journeys.
Yeah, I
So
was
if
going
we
to
can
ask
look at,
about that, the difference
yeah,
between value stream and a customer or user journey as well, and how they
yes.
are related.
So I think with strategy development, you need to do both of them at the same time. And obviously that might involve different stakeholders, right? Like depending on the thing that you're trying to deliver and the knowledge that you have within your like C-suite, and obviously different stakeholders, even just within your organization, need to be managed really carefully. The pursuit of improvement is an endless cycle. So I think it's important when you kick off these processes that you level set with your teams. It's like, we want to create a vision. It's probably going to take some time to get there, and that improvement is an iterative process, right? Like scrapping your whole estate is a significant exercise, but 99.9% of the time, I think it's a much better and drives a whole lot more value in the long term than, lifting and shifting 1,500 applications and just running them on cloud.
Yep. You don't have to do it all at once. You can
Oh,
pick up
100%. And that's
bits and
why
pieces.
I think if you start with your mission critical applications as well, that will inform a lot of your approach, because what you'll find is that a lot of it is tied together, right? And you'll probably look at your estate of mission critical applications, and you'll probably find that a lot of them are actually attached to other applications that are outside of that estate, right? So yeah, I think a lot of that will inform your approach. And if you look at those most important things, it will, keeping those end customers in mind and those people that are actually doing the work to deliver to your end customers, will help you to drive the best outcomes. But I do think that it is essential to understand how do things work today and what are the user journeys of the today, right?
Yeah.
With those
Current. You've
different
got to set level
personas.
set because you're level setting with everyone
Yes,
as well, right?
absolutely. And again, it has to be done very delicately, because what you don't want to do is spend months and months whinging about how bad things are. You need someone that's extremely skilled that can cut through that. And I would say that's not an easy thing to do, is to have to find someone that can deal with a level of complexity of, the most mission critical estates of applications, and also manage those stakeholders to be like, yes, we want to create a vision. Yes, it's going to take time. Let's not get stuck on the today. Let's level set. This is what today looks like. These are the non-functional requirements of today. And I think what you'll find as well is some of the non-functional requirements that you have today are kind of made up. They don't exist. And having someone that can cut through that as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
They might have made
that's
sense
where
like 5 to 10 years ago, but maybe
20 years ago. Exactly, exactly. I mean, you could just end up circling in negativity for months, right? And that's not going to help you. But I think doing that level setting exercise, understanding what the journey looks like today, what you also find is that executives actually don't understand what the journey looks like today. And therefore, there's like that misunderstanding between, what people think they actually need on the ground and what customers need, and what executives think is like appropriate.
Yeah. So the next step, I say you've got your current value stream laid out, everyone's input into it. You probably, after that step, what's the next step? I guess you've got to look at your problem areas, I guess, and where things can be optimized. Is that kind of the next part of the puzzle?
What is the North Star? Right. So, and again, in any like design thinking process, what does good look like to us? What are the key issues that we need to solve if we have the opportunity to, outside of what's going on today, if we just throw that away entirely, then what would our North Star look like? What is the goal that we are working towards together? Because I think having a level of agreement on that is really important. And you might have multiple goals, right? But prioritize them.
Is that like a step by step? Is that like a step by step? You have your end goal and then you have some interim goals, or is that how it works?
I mean, you might do. You can have multiple horizons, right? I think that's totally workable and a good way to go about it. And I've seen that done in like different, across different methodologies. Like, this is our North Star for 18 months time, but then this is where we want to be in 5 years. And those might be distinctly different, right? I do like to kind of, when I'm going through this process, I like to first throw out everything that we know, right? If we threw out everything we know and we just focused on serving our customer in the best way possible, what would that look like? What would that North Star be? And then work backwards from that, right? So if we consider that, I'm trying to think of a really good example. Like a really aspirational goal. I mean, if you're thinking about like healthcare, for example, maybe it's like we want to dispatch an ambulance within 30 seconds or whatever it is, right?
We
want to dispatch
an SLA.
to,
You want to make your SLA
to someone.
as low as possible.
Yeah. This is about setting a really clear goal. And it might be quite aspirational from where you are today. That's okay. Again, it's about being honest and clear with people that improvement is an endless process, and this is about coming up with that vision, and then the strategy is that's how we work towards it, right? But in terms of like that third stage, I think the best way to go about that is
so what's the third stage is like?
Well, then we're moving into kind of design. Yeah, reimagine. So if we completely scrapped everything, and I do think it's good to do this on a different day, by the way, just like for really pragmatic, to be really pragmatic. And it may be with different stakeholders as well. I think being mindful of the different stakeholders that are in the room. And it might even involve having some conversations with some more stakeholders that are more like grounded in the today about putting that to the side.
Yeah.
And that's a disagree and commit, right? So it's like, today, I need everyone to throw out everything that you know. I don't want to hear about it want to hear about any of it today. I want to hear about, if you could do it however you wanted to do it, what would that look like? How would the person that is on the receiving end of those services, how would they feel? And why would they feel that way? What would be their reasoning, right? And that informs that user journey. It's like, okay, this is what the user journey in our ideal world actually looks like. And you can do that for each of the different personas, right? So if we completely reconsider the value stream, what would those non-functional requirements be? What would those functional requirements be? And, and then it also gives you the opportunity to consider all the regulatory requirements and all these different things. I think sometimes there's an element of with that sort of stuff, because regulatory requirements can change, right? And we see them change continually. Sometimes there is an opportunity to go back to the regulator, and I've supported executives to do this and say, the requirements you're giving us actually don't make sense because of X, Y, Z. Things have changed since they were laid down. Can we rethink that so we can do things in a better way to support our customers? I think there's an element of that blue sky thinking as well. And again, the pursuit of improvement is an endless cycle. It's not going to happen today.
Yep, and that optimal, like that third stage, is about the optimal. Is that the optimal end state, or is that the optimal, first objective? Because you might not want to go straight to the end state. Or do you take the end state as a guide and then?
No, I think you take the end state as a goal, right? I mean, the journey of the users that you imagine is the goal in essence, right? That's what we want to work towards, and that's always going to be an iterative process. But what it will inform is things like, okay, well, we have say like 100 applications, and 20 of these are involved with like, again, going back to the NHS example, which is completely made up, by the way. I've never worked with the NHS. Is, like, what are the different systems we use to receive calls and take notes and communicate to dispatchers and prioritize ambulances and whatever it might be. Like, let's focus on those initial ones. How can we rework them in a way, like what would the architecture look like in order to enable this different way of thinking?
Which might mean throwing away a bunch of stuff and
totally. I would
honestly,
I would hope so. I would hope that it would mean throwing out a bunch of stuff, and that even that alone is, I think, a really hard journey for people. But it's an opportunity to do things in a different way and in a much better way. And I think as long as those stakeholders can be like, obviously that requires some really careful management by someone that's been doing this for some time. And is, potentially very sensitive, because obviously you need to keep intelligence within your organization. And if you push people over their limits, then, potentially they will leave and you will lose that intelligence. So it is really important that you carefully consider that process.
Yeah. So the next stage is around develop. So you know what your enhanced experience or looks like and what you're wanting to achieve. So next step is to develop all the architectural frameworks required, to actually make that a reality, which could be a lot of foundational work as well. But
absolutely,
I guess there needs to be foundational work, but then there needs to be the user journey in mind as well, about making sure it's the work that you're doing is actually valid and useful. Because otherwise people can get stuck in a bit of a rut doing things that might not actually have any value, and then someone 6 months later goes, what are these people doing? And if there's no value for it.
Yeah, and obviously in terms of architecture and getting to a point where you can get a detailed design, that's going to be an iterative process as well. And as with any sort of transformation, there will be trade-offs with things like op model, for example. It's like, okay, well, if we want to do things in a certain way, we need X, Y, Z specialist skills. And I always expect that sort of stuff will come out over the course of, and that's when we start making trade-offs, right? That's when we start going, okay, well, we see this as a non-negotiable. We have this thing as number one on our list. We need to, make the changes required in order to enable that, or provide the funding, or get the resources, or whatever it might be, or retrain the people, or, and I think all of that will kind of come out through the course of that development. And then it needs to be an iterative process as well, right? So it needs to be a process whereby, the architects come in, because you're obviously probably going to have some level of enterprise architecture and solution architecture and like cloud and infrastructure type SMEs, is that they will help the people to come up with those solutions, but they'll also be able to help identify a lot of those trade-offs. But that needs to happen in a like real cycle of feedback, right? Like, okay, we see this as being the best option. It means this for the organization, or it's expensive, or whatever the thing might be. Or there aren't many people with these sort of skills. Okay, we need to come up with a plan to mitigate that.
Yeah, which could be a training process, or, you can always figure out how to get the skills.
What's really important throughout this process is that there's that continual feedback with the voice of the customer and your users. And sometimes you might not really you're not going to be able to satisfy everybody's requests and complaints, right? That's just not a reality. But being able to give people the opportunity to provide feedback and being able to respond to that, in a reasoned kind of way, I think is really important. Like, it's fine to tell people no. Like, I tell people no, what you're asking for is not possible all the time. And this is why, because of the bigger vision, right? We can't do X, Y, Z at the moment because we're working towards something that doesn't marry up with that. Therefore, like, I understand where you're coming from. I empathize with your position, but ultimately this is in accordance with our long-term goals, or whatever it might be. I think, having those conversations is really important, being responsive to people.
It could be no, or it could be not now, and it could be next horizon, or it goes
later.
On the list for later.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. I think it's got to be in constant communication with stakeholders. Obviously, it's important throughout this process that you continually circulate the solutions with those end user personas and customers. And you might not be like talking to customers directly, but you need to have some sort of channel to your customers, right? And that might be the people that talk to your customers every day. They will have, they know, right? Your people that talk to your customers every day, they know what customers want and need. But then there are also equally, and again, going back to Amazon, they do this, like, they trial a lot of their products. They have 1.5 million staff or whatever. They trial a lot of their products with their 1.5 million staff. Is, I think, finding ways that you can actually trial new experiences and journeys is really essential as well. And as early on as you can. Whether you do that by the communication of ideas, or actually, as that idea progresses, moving it into that kind of pilot phase. It's like, okay, we're actually going to build this on a really small scale and see if it works, because you don't want to build something, you don't want to be working towards something that you don't know is going to work, or you're not confident that it's not going to work.
And that's important, because a lot of organisations do develop a lot of things in isolation for a while, and then they, come out 12 months later and the user's like, what's this rubbish? It just doesn't work. Or even worse, it gets leaked to the news, organisations, and then they get a bad rap. So having that early feedback.
Yes. And as leaders, I think what's really essential, and actually what I've seen done really well at organisations like Capgemini, is supporting people that failed. Something didn't go well.
That's right.
And I think that there's like, if I'm completely honest, I know that Amazon says that they do that. That's not my experience. My experience is you don't tell people about things that failed. You do not mention that, because you will not be, supported for that. I think that is really essential, as well as, like, how do we celebrate the things that didn't work? Because the things that didn't work, they inform us into the future, right? Like, that sort of stuff is actually really essential and should be, as applauded as things that did work.
I mean, it's definitely a learning experience. Like, we've all done things that haven't worked.
For everyone.
We've all learned from it. And the only failure that's a real failure is when you don't learn from it and do the same thing again. So don't do that. So having that architecture and then validating it with the users is super important. And then, like, you're kind of in a loop there, right? Developing, validating, shift direction. So your architects and your designers and your user experience people need to all be in sync with each other. And that whole thing will inform your whole organisational transformation, and then you can rinse and repeat that for other areas of
Absolutely.
business.
Yeah, totally. And some areas it's not going to be necessary. Like some stuff is just more like SaaS based kind of solutions, like for doing HR or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
I don't really know why you would completely reinvent that. I think there are some great products on the market and some not so good products on the market that you can, So I don't see this as like, do you have to go through this process with your whole estate? No, I
Absolutely
don't
not.
think so. No, I think that would be really extreme. But I think the what's mission critical to you as an organization, and to put it in a different way, what Michael said, what do you want to be known for?
Yeah. And what's your
And think,
differentiator? What's
yeah,
your
like
differentiator from
if
your
we think about the
competitors?
healthcare example, we think about the NHS. What do we want to be known for? We want to be known for, non-existent waiting lists. We want to be known for fast ambulance dispatches. We want to be known for empathy.
Yeah.
And do they have the right structures and processes in place to enable those things? At the moment, it seems absolutely not. But it's that's just an example, right? There are lots of different. I love the different examples because you can think about this in so many different ways.
And part of that, so if we go back to the start, I mean, we're getting to the end of the episode, but if we go back to the start, that whole empathize and clarifying the core problems and potential opportunities could be for those systems that do have SaaS versions that you throw out.
Yeah.
You've built a whole bunch of
Yes.
stuff over the years because it never existed. You couldn't consume it
Yep.
elsewhere. And
Yep.
if what you're doing is pretty stock standard, then there's probably a solution out there that requires a
Yeah.
bit of customization to get it going, and that could be one stream of work. And a lot of organisations do that, right? So they pick the SaaS version of the particular thing. Could be a HR system, could be CRM or whatever. There's solutions out there which may not fit all your needs, but they might fit 80% of what you need, and that might be good enough.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember as well that transformation is not the same as BAU. The two things, you can't have the same resources doing both. It's not going to work. In the end, everyone's tied to their BAU goals, right? So if you want transformation to happen, you need to goal people with that appropriately and dedicated resources to transformation. And having executives that those dedicated resources report into that have those goals.
Yep, for sure. All right, I think that's probably enough transformation design thinking for today. Thanks for your time, Georgia. That was really, really insightful. And if anyone's got anything that they want us to talk about, please let us know via the usual
And
channels.
fire us questions. I want to hear everyone's questions. Obviously, I've done this a few times now in the design and in the execution. So would love to hear what everyone's questions,
or problems you've
thoughts
seen
are.
in transformation programs,
Yeah.
those
Tell
sorts
us.
of things. And maybe
Tell
we can
us.
have another episode covering those things.
Yeah.
That'd
Yeah.
be good.
Love it.
Okay.
Awesome.
Till next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.